Adam Christ for MyMMAnews.com, being joined by the voice himself, Michael Schiavello. He is an absolute legend in the combat sports world. You've heard him on The Voice versus ONE FC, which is where he is currently, K1, Dream, the list goes on. Michael, I appreciate you taking the time. It's truly a pleasure.
Adam, pleasure is all mine, mate. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here with you.
So first and foremost, you got your big book coming out, Good Night Irene, due out October 1st. Those that don't know, pre-order it now. Can you just briefly describe what the life was being, as your title says, the bullied fat kid from Melbourne turned into a superstar?
Yeah, like you said, the book drops on October 1st, and it details it's stories from my life, which is what a memoir is. It's not an autobiography, it's a memoir. And I go back to those early days and go back to when I was at school and a young kid growing up and being teased about my weight. And, the sort of shattering of innocence. I think it was back in grade 3 that I first got teased, or I remember being teased about my weight, because then you're only like 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. And you if you're fat or you're overweight, you don't know it, until someone points it out and someone starts teasing you. So it's sort of like the fall of man in the mind of a 10-year-old. So it was really weird to go back and rejig all those memories and put them into the book. And then going through life as an overweight teenager, and then in my early 20s being overweight and wanting a career in television, in broadcasting, and getting told by people I didn't have the right look. I wasn't the blonde-haired, blue eyes, thin-looking, atypical TV presenter or broadcaster. But then proving those naysayers wrong, having a dream, being dedicated, working hard on it, being motivated, and just doing everything I possibly could to prove those naysayers wrong, to send a message that I hope really comes through in the book, that no matter what you look like, if you believe in yourself, you work hard enough, and you have desire, you can achieve anything. And I think really, I'm living proof of that. And I hope that social message comes through in the book, especially for a lot of young people out there who may be looking, a little lost in their life or a little down on themselves and are thinking, well, I can't be like those people. But you can be like those people. You've got to believe in yourself. Once you believe in yourself, Adam, other people will start believing in you. So I really hope that message comes across in the book.
Especially in the world we live in now, where being the victim of bullying, it's such a hot topic, and hot topic in the negative fashion, but it's a worldwide thing that's going on. And I'm so glad that you addressed it and you brought it to life, because it goes to show that anything can happen when you apply yourself. But I want to ask, go ahead. You look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, a lot of people have a sort of misunderstanding, I think, about bullying. There's a lot of different styles of bullying. And a lot of people, when you think bullying straight away, they think of a big goon picking on a small kid and beating him up and giving him wedgies and atomic wedgies and stealing his lunch and stuff. That's one form of bullying that goes on, the physical bullying, but the psychological, the mental bullying, and bullying about appearance, not only being overweight, but, if you've got acne, or if your skin is a different color, if you have a pigmentation disorder, whatever it may be, people are picked on their physical appearance for many things. And I just want people to know that go behind the physical appearance, because you are a voice, you are a spirit, you are a soul, you are more than just what you appear to be on the outside. And if you work hard enough, you can get past this and get to what's in here and make it work for you.
I love it, man. So you spend your life relaying the life of other athletes, of other phenomenons, of other people. Why decide now to finally share your stories of life through your eyes?
Several reasons. One is that over the years, I've told people so many stories, mates, friends, been out to dinners and that, and told them stories about celebrities I've met, Steven Seagal or Jean-Claude Van Damme or Jackie Chan or Maradona or Drake or Dana White, Joe Rogan, George Foreman, whoever it may be. And they're all in the book. And people are always like, oh, you should write a book about it. So, okay, write a book about it. But it's more than that. At a high school reunion a few years ago, a friend came up to me and he's like, we're chit-chatting. And I'm saying, what have you been doing since high school? He's like, nothing much has really happened. If I told you the story of my life, I'm born, I went to school, I worked, and then I die. All right. And he goes, what about you? And I'm like, well, if I told you everything I've done over the last 20 years, you probably wouldn't believe me. And that was the original title of the book, mind you, was You Probably Wouldn't Believe Me, because that was where the idea came from. It's like, if I put all these stories together, I let people know all the countries I've been to, all the people I've met, and how these experiences have shaped me into the person I am today, you probably wouldn't believe me. But here it is. And also I wanted to get something in writing also, Adam, because I work in a job where I'm flying constantly. I'm going to different countries, and those countries are often plagued by tsunamis and earthquakes and hurricanes and typhoons and that sort of stuff. And I figure one day maybe Mother Nature's going to catch up to me. And if she does catch up to me, I want to make sure that I leave a record for my kids, for my two sons, to say, hey, that's what Daddy did, and that's how he did it. And hopefully that can serve as not only a memory book, but as an inspiration to them and their kids and their grandkids and to other people they know that, that's what Michael did in his life. That's how he did it. And when we're feeling down, we'll go back and read that and say, if he did it, we can do it too, and give them some strength.
And another thing I wanted to add to that I'm sure you realize this, clearly being in the sport that you're in the view that you're in, but you're leaving a legacy for not only your family, not only your kids, but you are obviously clearly well written in the sports books of combat history. Clearly, clear as day. You've worked for Who's Who, and you've been there and done that. So it's really going to be a fun story and a fun memoir to read from the fans' perspective, because it truly gives them almost like a personal vault back into the voice itself to get to understand the history of where combat sports is today.
Yeah, the origin's all there. You ever wonder how I became the voice? You ever wonder about the origin of Good Night Irene? You wonder about the origin of how I got started in commentary and how I got started specifically in fight sports commentary. It's there. The story's all there. The people, the characters, the situation, the time, the events that I actually got hooked on fight sports, how I even got into broadcasting, how I got into media, how this fat kid became a global broadcaster. It's there in the book. And, thank you for those kind comments about a legacy. And I guess when you're doing things in life, doing something you're passionate about, something you love, a legacy is never really on your mind. You're never doing anything. I'm not sitting there at one championship events thinking, oh yeah, this is contributing to my legacy. But when you're on the outside looking in at someone's life, you see the legacy that they are building. And for me, it's, like I said, it's a legacy that I hope has a message that, whether you like me or you don't like me as a commentator or a broadcaster, at least you can see the things that I've done and say, well, you know what? That guy said he was going to do it. He did it without any education. My only education is high school. I don't have a degree. I don't have a degree in writing and broadcasting, journalism, commentary, none of that. I taught myself. So I want people to know that most professions in life can be learned. They can't necessarily be taught, but they can be learned. So remember that if you really want to do something, if you want to set up a podcast, a radio show, a TV show, you want to be a broadcaster, a commentator, you can learn that. Maybe I can't teach it to you, but you can learn it from me, if that makes sense.
I 100% agree. And just from the tiny aspect of where I can kind of relate is my full-time job is I'm an educator in, the full educating field. So I do this really as a side job. I love to do it. My passion for fight sports, it's endless. So it's honestly, I've gotten in there. I've called fights. I've commentated fights. So, and I don't have my journalism degree as well. So it's just shooting your best shot, giving it your best shot, and you never know what you can come up with. And I love that story and how you're making your point and making your mark with that. And I wanted to. And it's also,
Adam, it's also self-improvement as well. People don't realize this, that. Okay, let's give an example of setting up a podcast, okay, which is something that back when I was studying out in media, it wasn't possible. You had to go into proper radio, proper TV, proper newspaper or magazine. There was no podcast. There was no internet. Now it's available to anyone of any age to do a podcast. Now, if you want to eventually get this podcast seen around the world, you want to be the next Joe Rogan, or you want to get your own radio show, you want to be on Sirius or wherever it may be, you want to be on TV, on ESPN or wherever, you need to start somewhere. But when you're doing your podcast, guys, the key is improvement. It's no use doing 100 podcasts if number 2 isn't improved from number 1, if number 3 isn't improved from number 2, if number 100 isn't completely different to number 1. Because I see people out there that are podcasting and, doing their own little radio shows. And I don't say little to be belittling or demeaning, but they are little radio shows. But you can give them a larger than life feel and appeal if you're constantly improving every time. But I see people that are doing 20, 30, 40 shows, and they're a veteran of broadcasting now, doing their podcast. That's all fine and dandy, but your 40th show is the same as your first show. And you still don't know how to interview someone because you're not watching other interviewers. You're not watching good interviewers like yourself or someone like a Joe Rogan or some of the people like, whether you like or don't like an Oprah, or David Frost. I mean, watch those people. See how they interview people. That's how I learned. I read other journalists. I read other feature writers. I learned how to write. I watched other interviewers. I learned how to interview. I listened to commentators I liked and I learned how to commentate. Okay, I learned it from looking at other people. And even now, having commentated somewhere like over 7,000 fights and commentating for over 25 years, I'm still trying to improve every time I go out there and do a show. It's all about improving, because if you don't improve, what's the point? You'll always just remain, the same little small fish in a very small niche market that will never grow beyond that.
And I've heard you talk about how one thing you never want to do in previous interviews, you've talked about how you never want to be stale. You always want to improve. So yes, I have listened to you clear as day as from day one, but I want to also talk to you about, you've covered multiple combat sports. You've covered multiple sports outside of combat sports, period. And you've mentioned the limited market that you were given. When did you realize that market, that niche for combat sports, for kickboxing, that was your market?
Really good question. Really good question. Maybe when I got picked up to do K1 for the first time, which I'd done a couple of K1 shows in Australia, but then I got asked to fly to Japan for the first time in 2001. And, again, the story's in the book, but I'd love to tell it to you. It was 2001. I was working on a community radio station here in Melbourne, and I got a call from Dixon McIver, who was the K1 promoter out of New Zealand and Ray Seffo's manager, Mark Hunt's manager at the time. And he said, Voice, can you hop in a plane tomorrow and fly to Japan? Because we're broadcasting the event from Fukuoka on the weekend. And our commentator, Neil Walker, who's a very, very famous broadcaster in New Zealand, had gotten sick. He booked me a plane ticket. I didn't hesitate. I got on a plane the next day, flew to Fukuoka, and just my luck, the first ever fight I commentate in Japan for K1 was the greatest fight of all time, Mark Hunt versus Ray Seffo. I mean, wow. They loved, unforgettable. They loved my commentary in New Zealand, so I got picked up to do the K1 Grand Prix at the year's end at Mark Hunt won, and a great Cinderella story. And that really lit my great passion. And I guess answering your question, it made me know specifically that kickboxing was going to be my caper. Kickboxing was going to be my game that I could enmesh myself in and become the voice of that sport. Then later becoming the voice of K1 internationally, solidified that. And from that went on to, other combat sports like boxing at the Olympic Games or the Commonwealth Games, and, doing pro wrestling for Lucha Underground and all these different things. But I guess if I had to pin one moment for commentating kickboxing, it would have to be getting the gig in K1.
Would you say to date that's probably your most memorable moment? Because the list doesn't stop there. It keeps going. You're with ONE FC now. They're doing huge things, or ONE Championship, sorry. I'm still back in the FC. Do you think that is just your greatest focal point to look back on, to reflect on at this juncture?
There are so many points you can look at that in your life that put you on a certain trajectory that if that hadn't have happened, you wondered what might have gone on. I mean, what if Neil Walker hadn't gotten sick and I hadn't got that call up to go to Japan and show not only a pay-per-view audience, but a Japanese audience and producers and directors and that what I could do. So you wonder. So yes, it was a focal point, a turning point. I wonder back in 1992. I mean, again, the story's in the book when I interviewed Stan the Man Longanides, the great Australian heavyweight, and he was coming up to fight Dennis Alexio, one of the all-time greats, co-starred with Van Damme in the movie Kickboxer. What if Longanides' interview hadn't been so great? What if when I went to interview Alexio at his hotel room in the city, he hadn't taken this wet behind the ears 16-year-old kid with a tape recorder under his wing and spent so much time with him? I mean, what if I hadn't attended that fight? That was the first fight I ever attended, December 6, 1992, that I reported on. If none of that had happened, I may not be here talking to you today. So K1 was a major one from a commentary point of view. But certainly that first one where it all began was with Alexio and Longanides, December 6, 1992. From there, I fell in love with Alexio. I fell in love with kickboxing. I wanted to pursue this sport even more. And, that set me on a trajectory that I'm still going on today.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And you were previously mentioning your catchphrases, which you're clearly known for, the voice, the good night, Irene, the big kabush. One of my favorites, though, and I've heard the first time I ever heard it was an Amarius Zaromskis fight in Dream. And it was the song, the hold on, wait a minute, put a little. And I at that point, I was thinking, this is something else. This is something against the grain of typical commentating that I've heard. And I fell in love. And I was like, this is something different. It makes a mark. It makes you remember. Did you know that you had to somewhat make that stamp, make those little slogans to set yourself apart from others?
I think you have to. Listen, we're commentating a sport that is so exciting, that has so many storylines, so many characters, that isn't happening week in, week out like a league in football or basketball or baseball, where it's maybe once every couple of weeks or once a month. It's a special event. So you want to attach a special commentary to it. And, some people say, well, the commentators should just be in the background and not inject themselves into the show. And I agree in part with that. But also, when it's larger than life like K1, or it's larger than life like Dream or Dynamite or whatever it was that I cut my teeth in a lot, it deserves a larger than life commentary. So if you want to take it a little bit over the top, there's nothing wrong with that. And you've got to forge your own path. There's nothing worse than just being a guy who sounds like every other guy. And I hear so many commentators trying to sound like every other guy. And sure, you can see influences in my career. You can hear the Gorilla Monsoon influences, who was my all-time idol. You can hear influences from other people. I've never tried to imitate, but people have influenced. And take your influences. I hear people try to imitate me, and I'm like, that's cool and everything. I'm flattered by it, but at the same time, cut your own path. Be a little bit of Schiavello, maybe be a bit of the over the top, have some catch cries, but cut your own path. And I think it's important that if you want to be remembered and you want to keep picking up work in a specific industry, then own that industry. And the way to own that industry is to be your own self, be your own character. The people attached to that. I was talking to Chatri Sichitong, who's the CEO and chairman of One Championship, founder as well. And we were chatting earlier this year before the show started in Singapore. And he was saying to me, he goes, Michael, I knew when we wanted a new commentator, he goes, I knew I wanted you. He goes, I heard so many commentators that producers brought to me. And as soon as I heard your voice, he goes, that's the guy. I want Schiavello. He goes, because I knew you from K1. I was such a big K1 fan. I knew you. I knew Good Night Irene. I knew you screaming at the top of your lungs with a big knockout of Bata Hari or Semi Schultz or Jerome Labana. He goes, I knew your excitement, your passion. He goes, I wanted you. I wanted that for One Championship. So me separating myself from the others by having that exuberance, by having that over-the-top excitement, but also having the technical knowledge, endeared me to someone like Chatri that got me picked up by One Championship and has got me picked up over the years for gigs like the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games or Dream or Dynamite or Lucha Underground or whatever it may be. So I do think it's important to establish yourself and cut your own path and make it a path that you are remembered for.
I love it. I want to start closing it down. I don't want to keep you forever because the fans have to pre-order the book. They have to read it for themselves. I just wanted to touch up on it a little bit, my man. But I did want to ask you, what's one fond memory looking back from your entire career that just pops out? You've already talked about the K1 debut, but just one of those moments that just stands out. And then on top of that, once you answer that, if you can just give us one story, one highlight, one little chapter potentially that the fans can look forward to.
Oh man, so many highlights. It's hard to pick just one. If I'm going to pick just one highlight, I think commentating the Olympic Games in 2008. When you are part of the Olympics, Adam, you're part of the biggest sports spectacle on the planet. For any athlete, for any broadcaster, for any sports writer, it is the pinnacle. That's what you aim towards. To be able to say now that I am an Olympian, sure, not an athlete, but I'm part of a very select few that get chosen every 4 years for this event. So to be chosen to do the boxing at 2008 Beijing Games, broadcasting for the ABU, which we did that for 126 different countries. I did 242 fights on my own in 11 days. And to have a medal that they gave all the broadcasters, this beautiful medal that I have in my collection, to say I did that, to achieve that pinnacle, I think is a definite highlight. When you're talking a story highlight, there are so many. One that really stands out, I guess, interviewing Steven Seagal for The Voice Versus. Yeah. It's a whole chapter in the book, and I don't know where I start with it by telling you it was the only 1 hour TV interview that Seagal has ever done in his life. He'd never done more than, I think, an 8-minute television interview. Getting him to agree to that was a process, and you'll read about it. But then he rocks up in Scottsdale, Arizona for the interview at this beautiful penthouse suite in this Phoenician resort. And the sound technician is putting his lapel mic on Steven, right? He puts it on him, and then the sound technician comes over to me and he goes, "Hey, Schiavello, I've got to tell you something." I go, "What is it?" He goes, "Seagal's wearing something under his shirt." I go, "What do you mean? What do you mean he's wearing something?" He goes, "It's 115 degrees outside and the guy's wearing a Kevlar." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, he's wearing a bulletproof vest under his shirt." I'm like, "Really? That's peculiar, man." And then the interview's about to start. And Steven has a fanny pack, or a bum bag, we call it in Australia, a fanny pack, and it's in shot. So my producer, Daryl Ewart, God bless him, Emmy producing award winner, passed away a few years ago, sees the bum bag in shot and goes to pick it up. And Steven goes, "Sir, be very, very careful with my bag. If you drop that, there are many, many dangerous things in there that could kill us all." So Daryl's handling this bum bag with all the carefulness of Indiana Jones holding the golden idol of the Habidos natives, right? And he sets it down. And then he comes over and he goes, I go to Daryl, "What's in the bag?" Daryl's like, "Guns." I'm like, "Guns? Plural guns?" He goes, "Yeah, I think Steven's got like 4 or 5 handguns in his bum bag." I go, "What does he think's going to happen?" And Daryl's like, "Well, we are in the Wild West after all." And so it was a whole day. And there's more. There's so much more to this story that you can read about in the book. But I think interviewing Steven, who is one of the most peculiar, strange, amazing characters I've ever met, and I've met so many people, it's a story worth telling.
And I'm going to close out with this one before I let you go. For the fans that may not know, for the fans that, they're just picking up a little bit, I want the fans to know the little bit about Michael Schiavello, that what this means, this book, Good Night Irene, now that you've come out with this, what this means, thinking about that little boy that was bullied, thinking about the man that you are now.
It means a lot, It just means that the journey is there, the achievements are there, the life is there, and it means that I can share my story with a large audience. And I hope that story really serves every little boy and girl out there that are down on themselves, that are thinking they're too acne-faced, they're ugly, they're fat, overweight, they got sweaty armpits, they got the wrong color skin, whatever they may think of themselves, it's not true. You can do it. I'm proof that you can do it, okay? I'm proof that, a fat kid from Melbourne could go on to broadcast to hundreds of millions around the world and meet your Seagals and your Van Dams and your Jackie Chans and your Palais and your Maradonas and all these amazing people. I'm proof that it can be done. I'm proof that with self-belief and desire and determination, you can do it. And that's the main thing about the book, Adam, is that it's there. It's on paper. It will forever be there for people to read or to listen to on the audio book or to read the ebook. It's forever there. It won't go away. So no matter what happens, I can always say, and people can say, "Hey, you know what? If you're a little down, read this, take a look what this guy did, and let it inspire you."
I absolutely love it. Michael, I appreciate you taking the time. It was a true, true honor for me. From a fan's perspective, it was great to get to catch up with you. It was great to talk to you. And I also can't wait for the book. I definitely want to pre-order it. Is there any way that fans can pre-order a signed copy by chance?
Signed copies, I'm going to have to discuss with the publisher, because I've got so many people asking for a signed copy. I'm sure I'm going to set something up. But at the moment, if you're in the USA, do go to the Barnes & Noble website. Just type in Goodnight Irene and you'll find it on there. You can pre-order on Barnes & Noble. It will be available on Amazon and all the usual suspects as well. But at the moment, those in the USA, do go to Barnes & Noble, get it off there. But we're going to organise some signed copies as well to get out there to you guys. So thank you so much. And Adam, thank you so much for having me on my MMA News. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thanks, mate, for being such a big fan, a big supporter. And, mate, I'm a fan of yours now. I mean, you're a great interviewer, and I look forward to coming on the show again.
Oh, there he is. I appreciate it. Michael Schiavello, the voice himself. It was a true honor. You've heard him all over combat sports, all over the world. He's done it. You've seen it. He's been there. For Michael Schiavello, I'm Adam Christ. Make sure you pre-order and get your copy of Goodnight Irene, and keep it locked to mymmanews.com for all your fight news needs.